Welcome to A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. The Bible tells one big story of redemption, and we want to spend 5 minutes every day journeying through the Bible from start to finish and exploring how all of it points to Jesus.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. I'm Stephanie, and today I have the privilege to walk through 2 Chronicles chapters 7, 8, and 9 with you all. Let's get started. In these chapters, we finish reading about Solomon's reign. In chapter 7, we read how the glory of God descended on the temple just like it did on the tabernacle. His glory is depicted as fire, and it is actually representative of the person of God. He was present with them, and the people responded by bowing with their faces to the ground. We read about the lavish offerings included in Solomon's celebration as they dedicated the altar. They also observed the Day of Atonement and the Feast of Tabernacles. God was faithful to his covenant, and Solomon's temple was a physical marker of God's covenant, love, and faithfulness to his people. Then we read God respond to Solomon, and we read a well-known verse, verse 14, which says, "If my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sins and heal their land." God was telling Solomon and the people of Israel how to receive the Lord's blessings. Just as disobedience to God's commands brought about judgment, obedience to his commands would bring his blessings. And God called his people to humble themselves, to pray, to seek him, and turn away from their wicked ways. In turn, they would receive forgiveness and healing. But a heavy warning follows. If they turned to idols or disobeyed his commands, they would be plucked out of their land and ripped away from the temple. In chapter 8, we read about the breadth of Solomon's wealth and achievements. Remember, 2 Chronicles is a historical book. It's here that we also begin to see glimpses of idolatry and waywardness. We read about Solomon's first wife and how he built her a separate house away from the Ark of the Covenant because she was a pagan. Solomon's pagan wives would be a part of his downfall. 1 Kings 11 says Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines, and, quote, his wives turned away his heart. Solomon was diligent about adhering to the rules regarding temple practices, but he definitely had blind spots regarding wealth and women. We learn the extent of Solomon's wealth and wisdom in chapter 9. The Queen of Sheba came to see if Solomon lived up to his reputation of wisdom. Remember, Sheba was in Arabia, over 1,000 miles from Jerusalem, but she came, questioned him, and observed him, and she found that he did live up to his reputation. She was impressed. It was obvious to her that God had set Solomon up. I love what she says. She said, "God delighted in you and put you on his throne as king for the Lord your God, because your God loved Israel enough to establish them forever. He has set you over them as king to carry out justice and righteousness." This is what Solomon was to do as Israel's king. Unfortunately, Solomon turned away from God in his later years and led the people of God into idolatry. There were severe consequences for this. The kingdom divided. But God was gracious to Solomon for the sake of David, Solomon's father. Remember, God made a covenant with David, and he is a covenant-making, covenant-keeping God. It's a wonder that God does this in light of shortcomings of Israel's kings, like Solomon. Solomon, while wise and instrumental in constructing the temple, was a flawed king. He went beyond God's original intent for marriage between one man and one woman. He married 700 women, and they didn't share his faith, which naturally turned Solomon's heart away from his God. The kingdom divided. Subsequent kings would come and sin and fail and bring about destruction for God's people. But God, He is all-wise, He is sovereign, and He is ever so faithful. From the beginning, Jesus was the answer. Jesus, as the perfect offspring of David, fulfilled the covenant God made with David. He was perfectly obedient. He perfectly carried out justice and righteousness. And in Him, we partake in the blessings of perfect obedience. And we are justified and made righteous. That changes how we live. We live as the redeemed. We are made new in Christ, but we're still in the already but not yet. Our flesh still fails us. Like Solomon, our hearts can turn to find satisfaction in wealth and human relationships. We can get distracted by the cares of this world. We need to heed the Lord's call to humble ourselves, pray, seek His face daily, and by His strength, turn from our wicked ways. We will fail, but we can trust that no matter what, God will remain faithful because that's who He is. That concludes today's reading. Thank you for listening. As always, you can find additional information on our website, dailygracepodcast.com, and follow us on Instagram at @TheDailyGraceCo and @DailyGracePodcast. We look forward to talking to you again tomorrow.